Well, we have the two presidents and the umpire ready for the toss. On the left is the Oxford president, Chris Mahoney, and then Cambridge's president, James Palmer, and the umpire, Ronnie Howard. Right, gentlemen, if you care to toss. And the challengers, Cambridge will call, and Chris Mahoney, the Oxford president, is going to toss the George IV sovereign, dated 1829, that's traditionally used now, for the boat race toss. And it's heads, and Cambridge have won the toss. Now, that's the first time for 7 years that Cambridge have won, and Cambridge have chosen the Surrey station. Right, James, well done. That's the first time for a very long time Cambridge have won the toss.
Yes.
And you've chosen Surrey. Now, tell me why you've chosen Surrey.
Because I'd like a change. The scenery is different in Surrey.
Well, you certainly haven't had the Surrey station for years and years.
North Boris.
What do you think of the conditions today?
I haven't honestly looked, actually. I'm not very worried about the conditions. We can row in any water.
Now, you've been the underdogs for a long time. It's not pleasant, but you're fairly confident that you can turn the odds up?
I think so, yes. I wouldn't be here if I didn't.
Right. And Chris Mahoney? Well, that's a little bit against recent form, losing the toss.
Well, we were about to choose Middlesex anyway, so it doesn't really upset me too.
Why were you going to choose Middlesex?
We just decided that today was the day to choose Middlesex.
I see. And you've got a good crew with you.
Yep.
It won't be too fast today, will it?
No, there's a lot of landward coming down, which will make it slow conditions. Yeah.
All right, can we wish both of you good luck? Hope it's a good race.
Thanks very much.
Thank you both. Have a word with the umpire now, Ronnie Howard, who's umpiring for the 4th time and, of course, rode in the race twice. Now, you've had a little chat with the two presidents because last year we had all those collisions. Can you tell us what you've said to them?
Well, I've spoken to the coxes in particular and also to the crews. I haven't said anything that I haven't said on other occasions when I've umpired the race. And, one or two things. For instance, I tell them that when I say, "Are you ready?" I'm not asking a question. I'm telling them that I'm going to say go. So I don't expect anyone to say that they're not ready. The other thing is that we've discussed the right course to take with the coxes. In the end, and when we were discussing it, we were able to argue as to who was right and who was wrong. In the end, if there is any argument, what I say is right, and they need to react on what I tell them. That is really all that has to be said.
Now, it's been said that you were going to put the stake boats fairly close together and give them something like 10 feet clearance between the two crews, so that they both have a fair chance of the good water. Now, is that exactly what you've done?
That's what I've tried to do, certainly. We've very often tried to stop quarrelling by putting the stake boats a long way apart, and the result is that as the fastest water is in the middle, both crews will tend to go to the middle, and that means that at some point there must be a collision.
Okay, well, hope it goes well for you, and hope everybody has a good race.
Thank you very much, Harry.
Thank you. Well, now, as everybody, I think, in the world knows, we've got a lady rowing in the boat race for the first time this year, and we're delighted to say that along with that, we have a lady in the BBC television commentary team for the first time, a very well-known lady in the rowing world, Penny Chuter, who, of course, is the senior national coach to the Amateur Rowing Association. Welcome to the team, Penny. Right, now, Cambridge have won the toss, and they've got the Surrey bank. Can you just explain to us what that might mean?
Well, I think they've clearly chosen the Surrey bank, that is the lower part of the map, because they will aim to try and hang on to Oxford through to about here, where they get all the advantage, all in one piece, whereas the Middlesex station has some advantage at the beginning of the race, some advantage at the end of the race. Cambridge have chosen to try to hang on against a slight disadvantage here, and then see if they can use the inside of this bend to advantage and stay with Oxford. If Oxford can't get clear of them by here, then Oxford cannot take the Surrey station's water, so they can be pushed out round the bend.
Now, we've got the wind out of the north-northeast. Rough water anywhere?
Harry, much the same as last year, in fact, although at the moment the breeze is a little bit fresher, a little bit stronger. They'll have shelter here. They'll have a headwind on this stretch, and this stretch will probably be quite choppy and against the tide. Round here, they'll get a good tailwind helping them through.
I take it, like everybody else, you fancy Oxford, do you?
Well, I think so, yes.
Penny, thanks so much.
Surrey side. The boats will shortly be placed in the water, and here's your boat race commentator, Harry Carpenter.
And the first crew to take to the water, Cambridge, now coming out of their boathouse with their wooden boat. So many boats these days, racing eights, have carbon fibre insertions, but Cambridge have gone back to the traditional wooden boat. Alf Twin, the boatman, leading them down to the water. Alf Twin, I don't know how many boat races he's looked after for Cambridge, but it's an awful lot. So the challengers who've won the toss and have chosen Surrey are the first to embark. Now, having safely got the boat afloat, back to get the blades. And they really have got a monumental task ahead of them here. But at least they've got the choice of station, and that's the first time that Cambridge have been on the Surrey station since way back in the middle 70s. James Palmer, the first man down to the water's edge. Now they go in from bowman, and the bowman is John Bart, 20 years old, Shrewsbury and Keys, who is one of the men who's changed his position in the boat in the last 10 days. He's moved from 7 up to the bow, but he rode bow last year for Cambridge. John Bart. Number 2 is Mark Panter, 22 years old, Kingston and Lady Margaret Boat Club. That's the St John's College Boat Club. Same seat as last year, another man who rode in the race. Number 3, Roger Stevens, 20 years old. He rode in the Goldie, the reserve crew, at 7 last year. Goldie lost that race. Number 4, Miles Clark, 20 years old. He also rode in the losing Goldie boat last year in that same seat, number 4. 5 is Michael Cowie, who's coming up to 22 years old with glasses. He moved from bow down to number 5, which is the sort of powerhouse of the boat, only 10 days ago. 6 is Graham Phillips, who's rode twice in this race before, last year and the year before, and still only 20 years old. The president is James Palmer, rowing at 7, and he is in his 3rd successive boat race too. And all the excitement on the river, of course, now for the reserve race between Isis and Goldie, and Isis, the dark blues, have already got an advantage over Goldie in the opening strokes of the reserve race. And we're back with Andrew Dalrymple, the stroke of Cambridge, who rode in this race last year. And the cox is Chris Wigglesworth, who also coxed Cambridge last year, 21 years old. Reading engineering, comes from Sussex, Uxfield. And now the Cambridge boat moves slowly from the shore. And that can't have been too encouraging for them to see the Goldie crew down against Isis so early in the race. And in fact, they're about half a length down. Now the Oxford boat safely afloat, and there's the young lady that all the excitement has been about in the pre-race publicity. Sue Brown, the Oxford cox, with Albert Andrews, the Oxford boatman, another man who's been with the Oxford 8, boat race after boat race, within most people's memory. And not a wooden boat, as you can see, for Oxford. They're sticking to the modern conception, plastic boat. And these boats now cost something like £4,500 to £5,000 a piece, which just gives you an idea of how much it costs these days to run the boat race. Sue Brown, 22 years old, who really has stirred up a lot of interest in this race this year. The first lady ever to take part in a university boat race. Now then, the crew come to take their places. Bowman is Phil Head, who rode in this race in '79, didn't row last year. He withdrew from rowing for a year or so, and in fact went abroad. Phil Head, 22 years old, but back in the seat in the bow that he occupied 2 years ago, from Hampton Grammar School and Oriel College, Oxford, reading modern languages. Number 2, Nick Connington, who rode in the crew last year. This boat is full of blues. He's 20 years old, the same seat, in fact, as last year, former youth international, who cut his hand in training, of all things, on a spear. But apparently, well, you can see it's still bound up, left hand. Nick Connington, also of Hampton Grammar School and Oriel, 2 men from the same school in the bows. And then 3, Richard Young, 24 years old, from King's School, Canterbury, and New College, disappointed last year when he was dropped from the blue boat during training. Number 4 is Richard Emerton, 20 years old, Abingdon and Christchurch, who rode at 6 last year in the reserve crew Isis, winning crew, of course. He's reading law, comes from Wargrave near Henley. 5, familiar figure in the boat, of course, the familiar figure of Boris Rankov, who is rowing in his 4th race this year. And only 12 men in the history of the boat race have rowed 4 times or more. In fact, there's only been 1 man who's rowed 5 times. So Boris Rankov is making a little bit of boat race history. Bradford Grammar School, Corpus Christi, and now St Hugh's College at Oxford, which is another little first in the boat race. Of course, St Hugh's is a women's college, and in fact, Rankov, who's a junior fellow now, is lecturing there. And a women's college has never been represented in the boat race before. Boris Rankov, 26 years old now, in his 4th race and looking for his 4th successive win as well. 6 is the president, Chris Mahoney, 22 years old, Hampton Grammar School again, and Oriel, 22, 3rd year in the same seat, and president this year, of course. Outstanding oarsman, Chris Mahoney. And then 7 is Mark Andrews, another blue, rowed last year in the winning boat, 21 years old, from Abingdon and Magdalen. He rowed at 3 last year, not at 7, after moving from this seat. And finally the stroke, John Bland, also rowed last year. Rowed at 4 last year, he didn't stroke the boat. John Bland, 22 years old, from King Edward VI School, Stafford, and Merton College, Oxford. He's a biochemical physiology student and comes from Acton Trussell in Staffordshire. And finally, of course, the lady cox, Sue Brown, 22, 5'3". She's about 5 inches shorter than the Oxford cox, and she's 6 stone 8, so she's a stone and a half lighter than the Cambridge cox. Sue Brown, who comes from Honiton in Devon and is reading biochemistry. She, of course, was in the Moscow Olympics. She coxed Great Britain's women's 4 in the Olympics last year. So Oxford safely afloat and now paddling down to the start where Cambridge have already arrived. Well, now we can take you aloft to our camera in the helicopter, and we're looking down at the start now. And as you can see now, they get a bend on the Middlesex side. The Middlesex side is over on the right-hand side. That's the Fulham Wall you can see on that side. The Surrey bank is immediately below us. So the crew on the Middlesex station get a slight advantage of the bend in the early stages. That white grandstand there is the grandstand at Craven Cottage, the home of Fulham Football Club, where of course rugby league is also played today. Fulham away today to Chesterfield. Now the Surrey bank right down below us, and as they leave Craven Cottage, they begin to move into this enormous Surrey bend, which turns through 180 degrees. They start in it rowing north, and they come out of it rowing south. Those are the reservoirs down on the Surrey side. And Hammersmith Bridge now will be coming into view in a moment from our helicopter. That's the Harrods Repository on the Surrey side. You can just see going beneath us now. There's the bridge, Hammersmith Bridge. And as they shoot Hammersmith Bridge, they reach the apex of this huge Surrey bend, and at that point they've covered 2 miles, not quite halfway. Now then, that's the apex of the bend you're looking at now, and we begin to turn out of it now. There's Chiswick, the famous island, over on the Middlesex side of the river. Now they're still turning on the Surrey bend here, coming down through Chiswick Reach and approaching Corney Reach. Now you can see how the bend begins to go back to the Middlesex side. That's Barnes Railway Bridge in the distance. Duke's Meadows on the right-hand side on the Middlesex station. This is the point called the crossing, where the boats must come from the water on the Surrey side to the best of the water on the Middlesex side. They must shoot the central span of Barnes Railway Bridge. That's about 3.5 miles when they reach Barnes Bridge. Having shot the bridge, then they have this quite sharp Middlesex bend to negotiate towards the finish. In the distance you can see Chiswick Bridge, and they finish just below Chiswick Bridge. And the finish approaching now just short of the bridge. And at that point they will have come 4 miles, 374 yards.